Hello everyone, welcome to week 5, presentation coming up on Thursday. I thought it would be a good time to not only reflect and go over a few things, some of the terms that have been coming up and people just kind of re-questioning what does it mean, but also to kind of position us as designers of form and step through some cool images about stuff. And also to look at, I'm just going to share my screen, and also to look at some of the CEPTD issues. Okay, that should be good. We should be good. Week 5, here we are. Steph told me that she likes to watch me at about 1.5 or double speed. So by all means, I think it's very clever. So let's go over some things. Fundamental assets, what might they be? Specifically this site, let's just keep having this conversation. So by fundamental assets, I'm thinking, what is unchangeable or mostly? And I say mostly because, you know, you can see I kind of add Anzac Bridge in, etc. But, you know, think what is unchangeable or mostly and of the place. So this is all about the site specificity. So what might be some of the fundamental assets, and there's more of them, but when I start making a list, you know, you might say it's got an elevated framed sunset. It's very specific to the place. It's a very pleasurable evening experience. It happens behind the power station every night, unless it's super cloudy, but, you know, I'd call that a fundamental asset of the site. It has a sun and a moonrise facing the cityscape view. That's pretty amazing. You know, the cityscape view is often a very desirable one. It has glistening, protected, rather still, mostly still, deep harbour water. And it has underwater harbour life. We hope it does, but I think there needs to be a lot more. It has 2 tidal changes a day. It has soil in need of repair. So I could call that toxic soil. Now, is that an asset? Maybe. You know, I think it's just where we hold it in our head. Maybe. How could it be an asset? This has come up in conversations in the week, and Ben and I talking and with students. You know, it could potentially generate years of fields of sunflowers or tomatoes or any plants that Sue-Ann was talking about. And goats. I mean, how hilariously fun would that be? It's a fundamental quality of the site now, in any case, and that damages sea and soil life daily. So I think it's something we have to acknowledge. I didn't hear it acknowledged in the Greens presentation that we looked at the other day. It's a peninsula of land, historically an island, that juts into the harbour and now framing the Sydney Harbour Bridge Horizon event. Now, a fundamental asset of the site is it has a large elevated ant trail of traffic to one side. It has cut sandstone walls. So these are all very specific things to the site. It has modified slopes. Now they're terraces to the water's edge, but it would have used to been a slope, like every other edge condition pretty much, going into the harbour. They've now been flattened and terraced and put on pylons, etc., filled in. But the fundamental assets of it would have been modified slopes, now terraces. So that, you know, all these are, I'm putting language to things that you could potentially play with too. Fundamental asset would have had vegetation and ecologies of all scales, trees to mosses to microbes. Now, are they all gone? Are they erased? Or are they just surfaced over? What's redeemable in this magnificent flooded rear that we call Sydney Harbour in our site over here? Let's consider this abiding events phrase a bit more. Originally, it was written by an author, Tony Swain, in a book called A Place for Strangers. I'm apologising for noisy children coming in, if they come in A Place for Strangers, towards a history of Australian being. Well, you can see the reference there if you want to look it up. But I've used it, and many people have used it. I'm not distinct in this way, but this is just a little page from my master's, and I just wanted to draw some attention to it. So this idea of dream time, as another anthropologist, T.G.H. Strello, had noted, emerged from a mistranslation of the Algira root. You could read this later. It's a mistranslated word, dreaming. The word dreaming or dream time has nonetheless worked its way through academic definitions back through popular culture, spreading through virtually all Aboriginal English as a kind of self-fulfilling academic prophecy. As linguist Eve Fells says, dream time is a compound word dreamed up by an English speaker who could not understand the Aboriginal languages. So there is a lot of, do not believe too quickly, as I keep quoting Kate Grenville about, but this idea of the noble savage, this idea that we've been holding kind of Aboriginal ways as something separate, as this sort of dreaming, when, as we see from this writing, this talking about abiding events, it's exactly the opposite. Following Strello's rendering of the original Aranda meaning, eternal events, so he translated that original word, the mistranslation of the Algira root, to meaning eternal events. So now you can start to hear where this is coming in with abiding events. Eternal events approaches the reality, but perhaps still harbours too many unjustified time reference. As has been pointed out by others, Aboriginal people, I wish I preferred I'd written, constructed their word, sorry, I've quoted that off somebody else's writing. Aboriginal people constructed their world in terms of rhythmed events. And so we might better inquire into the nature of the so-called dreaming as a kind of trans-temporal class of events. The words that I find most applicable in English are abiding events. This is Trello's quote. Collectively, these form an abiding law. Abiding has the advantage of not only adjectively conjuring up something of the trans-temporal quality of notions of the eternal and enduring, but also, as we will see more positively and importantly, having the significance of residing in a place. Moving on, and this brings me to the rationale of the preceding extensive examination of Aboriginal time. For I now wish to show that the tragedy of the dream time is not so much the inaccuracy of translation, but rather the fact that it has blinded us to the true significance of the concept. The dreaming is not predominantly temporal, but rather is spatial. And if you want to come back to this and read over that in your own time, there's some bigger words thrown into there, but this idea of abiding events is very spatial. It's events that happen on the site of the site. It's quite something to get your head around, and I do feel you are all starting to do that. So congratulations. What I've noticed in some of the other work I do with the Illawarra Local Aboriginal Land Council is we are involved with the University of Wollongong's ocean research area down there called ANCORS, and under them there's a shared program called Blue Futures, and I'm just going to mention it because I was thinking how it overlaps. Blue Futures is a keystone research project run by lots of very clever people. And the excerpt below is from their webpage. A keystone project at the University of Wollongong is part of their global challenges. It positions the New South Wales South Coast as a national leader in the development of blue economies, drawing on ocean and coastal resources for economic development. The Illawarra Local Aboriginal Land Council has partnered with Blue Futures on this project to work towards Indigenous Blue Futures, which is a cross-cutting strategy. I think that means cuts across all sorts of faculties and areas. We will trial a community-based model of sustainable development which places, this is the important bit, Indigenous knowledge and aspirations at the heart of planning processes. We'll take a lead role in project design and overall project guidance of this strategy. I'm going to keep moving along. Dr. Michelle Voyer states, Blue Futures sought to reimagine the way in which we might think about ocean use and management. Partnering with the Land Council was core to this vision. This partnership challenged us to think differently about how we could and should design and conduct our research. Bingo, good one, Michelle. This is good too. It allowed us to explore ways in which we could acknowledge country in our lives, our work, and our research. The partnership with the Land Council has enriched our research practice as well as our outcomes. We could have a whole other discussion about what people are doing down there, but I just wanted to draw us into this idea of in which we could acknowledge country in our lives, our work, and our research, and that we flip that into this kind of languaging we're using. So we've been talking about staged master plans, we've been talking about action plans. Marty Franch talked about maintenance plans, I suppose. You know, I note that Blue Future's team under the Land Council, with the Land Council, are talking about milestones. And I thought it's very similar. So setting up this kind of timed events, when this milestone is reached, then we'll go to the next milestone. When this milestone is reached, then we'll go to the next milestone. And I just thought I'd include that in case this helps make some of this clearer. Now let's pull it all together. Thank you, Caroline Pidcock. So with our terminology, befriend, tend and mend. So there's befriend, those who can assist, naphagy. Now in the red is what I've kind of just thrown in there today. So you could say that the befriend aligns with fundamental assets. In a way, it's get to know your friend, get to know the site, acknowledge country in your lives. What are the abiding events? And that's what you're all starting to do now. Tend to apply one's attention to deep understanding and listening. So that's about site specificity. It's about the Beth Meyer, the site speaks prior to the act of design. And that aligns here with also this acknowledging country in your lives and abiding events. Mend, so to repair, to restore to good condition. And maybe in stages or phases or by systems or setting milestones, maybe that is how we work with mend on our site. And again, I think this is very relative to acknowledging country in your lives and abiding events. Befriend the neighbours. These are some beautiful shots from a guy called Wayne Rigby. It's on his Facebook site. He's a friend of Bridie King, who is in our Fringe interview that I'll load up later today. But these are just around the corner, about 100 metres away from your site, up on the Balmain side. And I think we'll return to them a little bit. But you can start to see the flavour of the local community, really, and the sort of spatial configurations around the area. That's this old sandstone, old elements of industry, this edge, the different treatments of edge. We'll talk about this a little later today. The boat harbour edge look, walking promenade, plus working of scale, working marina. I want to move us along into Astrid Huwald's CEPTD lecture and just connect some images that she and I talked about and she wasn't able to put up at the time. A lot of the following come from Yaya Architects and their project Park and Play. It's an icon CEPTD project, Astrid said. It's in Copenhagen. When we're looking at these, just consider that Jane Jacobs' Eyes on the Street and note, you know, we're about to look at a lot of big top-down, well-funded, cool projects. Warning, viewers. Too fun. Look, I mean, this thing's freaking awesome. So they've built a car park in Copenhagen on a site not dissimilar to ours, and they've activated it at all sorts of possible ways. The scale of it, of course, as you can see, is a rooftop building. You know, I look at that and I wonder what the powerhouse could be, or another new building. Of note, you know, is this grand staircase that goes up it. And I realised as I put it here, I meant to throw in an image of the staircase put in by McGregor Partner and Choi Ropier at Ballast Point. And I'm sorry I haven't done that. Google that right now if you're interested. So the idea of the big staircase and providing this eyes on the street experience at scale. Now that is an amazing sort of multi-scale operation there. Park your car, walk up to the playground. You know, it's obviously bigger than this. They went the green building as well. They actively put in seating along the staircase. You know, the whole thing was about eyes on the street, even for a car park. You can go to your gym sessions there as an adult. You've got activity, you've got kids. You've got this idea of sort of lower lighting. You'll see it come up quite a lot in these projects I'm about to look at now. But I think that's a pretty amazing kind of multi-scale eyes on the street scenario they've set up there with these very small scale, you know, human moments, not the extra small, not the extra small, but I've just the way they've been able to create that, this red beam bringing the scale in around people, the lights coming lower. Hopefully, there's more ambient lighting on the site. Let's hold this idea of eyes on the street, and let's jump to sort of the bigger, more classical Roman even idea of the belvedere. So belvedere means the beautiful far view. There's a few images of a variety of them. Often you see them in a particular period of houses, of sort of extra little pop-ups of glass rooms on the top of buildings. Most iconically is perhaps Villa Rotunda by Palladio in Italy, where it's a beautiful symmetrical square with these sort of viewing porches, let's call them that. All acting as sort of belvederes. I guess a belvedere can be a veranda, can be a porch. Look at this lovely thing up here. Look at this contemporary walkway up here, and this wonderful thing, and you know, all the time designing to the view, actually consciously very much doing it. And I just, you know, I think of this kind of project and I think, belvedere, interesting. Let's look at a couple of the recent projects come out of the Barcelona conference. This one in Spain, Carl Enrique Studio, Badia de Valls, and again, and just holding that idea of the belvedere and these kind of insertions into this site of the tall and narrow, an elevator here, people coming up, people going down, nice material quality. I thought slightly appropriate to the site. I just thought I'd pop that in, this idea of the sort of new belvedere and where you can bring this idea in of maximise that distant view. Belvederes on site. A couple of grand spankers there. The cross to the city view from Balmain on the left, and the I didn't quite mean to term it this, but the old up the guts to the Sydney Harbour Bridge from the Isthmus. CEPTD and Astrid's talk comes into my mind about lighting possibilities, and I thought we should have a little look at that in a sort of nice imagey way. Here's a project in China that's done very well. I think it won the something People's Choice Award at the Barcelona conference last week. Landscape gentrification of the steel plant. And as exactly speaking to Astrid's words about warm tones, ambient lighting, let's throw in there, what if you didn't do anything to the site? What if you added nothing? You know, what if you just lit some of the components? And many of you are starting to see the possibility of that in some of the discussions we had on Thursday. And I just thought kind of nice to see, you know, this is what ambient lighting can be starting to have a look and a feel like when people get beyond thinking of the pole. The pole remains fairly popular, and certainly there's some mighty fine poles on our site. This idea of refitting some of them potentially with lower lights, and you can see that there. But you know, it's the pole. It's a fairly trad idea, but there it's getting a little reworking. This project not so far away now in Portugal, in Lisbon, by FC Park Orient. And again, this use of the pole and the sort of multi-level lighting emission. The pole bending, the pole having a sense of life. There we see a relevant edge condition to our site. Lovely big boat coming in. The idea of the pier. The bent pole, again, was with a multi-source possibility. So, you know, I think that's probably a pretty clever thing to be thinking. How far can you extend that at a design level? Again, another project in China, in Shanghai, similar to that previous ones. If I went back, I don't know if it's the same design studio TJAD, but that ambient lighting, again, on existing infrastructure, I think very powerful, actually. And again, in that, almost don't need to add anything. Here we see it again on various large-scale elements of infrastructure around the site. You can see the extensive treatment given to getting pedestrians around this area, and sort of adjacent to the, I don't know if that remains a working port. Certainly the elements are still there. Wouldn't it be exciting if it still was? I think it's a pretty terrific project. This is the first time I'd seen it when it was presented last week. So it might be one to sort of investigate in. I know some people have been looking for precedents of working ports that are also have a public realm. Catherine Gustafsson has done many beautiful projects over 3 decades, really, at least. And I'm only throwing one image here of the project she presented in Barcelona, really, and just putting it in this CEPTD context of lighting and lighting of the paths, not a pole to be seen. Look at what are the ways to incorporate lighting into this site, into your design. I'm assuming the trees perhaps were already there. I'm not sure whether they've all been planted, brought in, but it's quite interesting what gets lit. Prince Alfred Park here in Sydney by Sue Barnsley, very CEPTD. Eyes on the street, even at night. It has that very active edge of sport till late in the night. I think it's 11 or 1 o'clock. But even having seen Astrid's talk, I asked myself that question: could it have been warmer tones? Could the light sources have been even lower on the path? Could they have been, more ambient? The structure of the poles being considered. I think it's a terrific project. It's not a good image of it, but I've heard Sue talk about this idea of stockings on her light poles, and you can see the bottom third of each pole is grey, leaving the top 2/3 with fairly lovely astroturf blue, and it ties everything together very beautifully. That's not a criticism of Sue's lights, but it's quite interesting looking through several projects and thinking about it. This is a project of mine. I thought we'd just have a little talk about it. It's 20 years old. It's Randazzo Park, and certainly we did put time into it. With the lighting, the main elements were these very long seats, and I guess Leanne O'Shea and myself, in conversation with Astrid Huwald as well, but you spatially, Leanne and I were trying to resolve a lot of things. How can we have multiple elements? How can we have single elements that do multiple things? And how can our seats, our long benches, be the lights, be the seats, be the sort of hold the view, be announce the threshold of the park? There's an entrance down one of the sides. There's a playground off to the one side, so the bench there on the right acts as a sort of safety barrier to the mounded area over the back. Randazzo Park with Astrid Huwald, who fell wonderfully pregnant just before construction of the light out of this wonderful steel mesh, creating this, oh my God, I've forgotten the term. What is it? I said it last week when we were talking to Astrid. Creating this, I can't remember the word, it's left my head, where you have 2 grids on top of each other. Moire, M-O-I-R-E, creating this moire effect. Even in the day when the sunlight's on it. So we were looking at how light can be both beautiful at night or interesting or distinctive, and the same in the day. We used Marlena Krantz, who's a fashion maker, to help make the lights with us. She was wonderful, and we needed somebody of that level of detail, particularly using that sort of image of women's stockings kind of off suspenders as a detail to the fixings. I think we do that every 5 metres along the mesh strip. So lighting is detail design, how it could be ambient, how it allows for almost minimal additional poles on the site. Elements are all multifunctional. The seat is the light, it's the view line, it's the gateway, it's the safety fence, it's the theatre. It's sat at a larger scale in that way, but we tried to do a similar thinking with these kind of bollards. Yes, we kind of ripped them out of Spain. When I look at them, I go, yeah, you know, but we did try to, what did we do? We did a few things, actually. I'd not recently, if this was about 1999, I'd just been teaching with Richard Weller, who I think many of you did a studio with early last year, which I saw some of the images of. It was terrific. And Richard had used some strategies in the Canberra project about extension and sort of augmenting elements out. And so our spacing of these balls, from memory, it was something like 1 metre apart, and the next one was 2 metres apart, the next one was 2.5, the next one was 3, and the next one was 3.8, and the next, they elongated in their spacing just to give a sort of directional quality into the site. So we needed some bollards to stop cars coming in, but we tried to look at how the bollards could be multifunctional. So they also became the lighting. They spelt out the word Randazzo. That's a B, that's a D up in the top left, and the photo is inverted. It was published that way, out of my control. But the word is Randazzo. So we had that many bollards and that many letters to deal with. The park was named prior to coming along. Could the bollards be the park signage? Could they be the teenage perch seat? Could they be the edge conditions? We were trying to get to work at multiple scales, work to the driving car scale as they go past, and you get this sort of blur of a light, as well as the human scale as seating. And I guess both Leanne and I kept thinking of what you don't need to add in, and how can one element provide multiple solutions. And 20 years later, I think of Randazzo Park as kind of overfurnished or overcooked a little bit. And I ponder what we'd do differently, I guess. And, you know, even this idea of staging. But this was a different time, and the site was given over to Moreland City Council by the Kennett government at the time, and cleared of the existing school before we came along. So, you know, how you get in the front end of that conversation is a bigger topic. Okay, so there's a little bit about lighting. There's a little bit about some of the terminologies. Let's just pick up again on something Astrid was talking about. The promenade as a typology. It seems very relevant to the White Base site. Jumping back into Barcelona, the recent conference again in Spain. Spain fared very well. It's good when you hold a conference in your home country. You can really applaud yourself. This I just sort of saw in a presentation. I thought I'd pull it out, just have a little conversation about the promenade, and, you know, the pulling out of different layers, and I guess the pulling out of experiences. And I think, you know, this looks as an image just exquisite. This pump out of the single individual hanging over the water. And I think perhaps that's a better resolution than what happens on the Ballast Point site by McGregor and Partners, which I should have shown, and I will show in a further lecture, perhaps, if I can remember, which has a much more sort of sculptural insertion. I think this is super lovely, actually. And I just hold that up against this idea of the promenade of what's local, and these images from Bridie King's friend Wayne Rigby's Facebook, and Bridie forwarded them to me, and it was titled "Lovely Walk This Afternoon with Some Mates." So this edge is just metres away around the corner from your site. On the Balmain side, Bridie in the Fringe interview you'll see the context of this. It's somewhere where she used to live. But I was, you know, I was interested in the combination of boats mooring and promenade edge, and the beautiful sort of handmade, bespoke kind of bricolage. I don't know if you know any of those terms. Bricolage is the making use of what's at hand. Use of the local kind of material qualities of these, particularly these two images on the right. Lovely, actually. Downplayed, simple. You know, what if you hardly added anything to the site? Could you still allow boats to be mooring? Could you still open up a much more charming local experience of the promenade? Chris, I was thinking of your site round on that western side, southern side. What other possibilities lay there to the existing? Back to that Spanish edge, that same project. just looking at that combination of, I guess, that groin rocker riprap kind of edge and how they're sort of working with that and the promenade. It's good to hold these ideas up with Michael van Valkenburg's, I don't have an image of it here, mesh, mesh fencing edge. The pedibus, I think I've cropped something off here. This is a project in Florence. It's kind of an idea that's been realised. The pedibus, the foot traffic as well, it's sort of the foot walking bus, that's what it is. And it's very CEPTD, Astrid said. Show them the pedibus, Astrid said. And it really plays with this idea of territoriality, the small-scale interventions, and this idea of the episodic, which is a wording that comes up in a reading that I put up in your legato about episodic interventions by Peter Elliott Architects. And it's an interview between him and Leon van Schaik, who's been very influential in Melbourne architecture the last 30 years. This idea of the episodic, sort of projects happening potentially as milestones or across time. There's small scale interventions. There's a plan there. These are all available online. I just typed in pedibus, Florence, Italy. And these sort of small upgrades of moments, thresholds into buildings, bike paths. And sorry that this plan's so unclear, but you can see there's somewhat of a journey around it. I think it tries to get a whole heap of kids to a particular school. This idea of urban acupuncture and just shifting these kind of rubbish bin car park idea to a much more, you can't quite see it, but there's this lovely timber, that piece, I think this sort of timber ramp up into, maybe that's the school entrance, I don't know, but just these small acupuncture interventions into the site. And I could see how this thinking could be useful when one is planning out over time. You know, what if over the next 20 years only certain episodes occurred on your site? What design opportunities does that allow? And potentially when greater funding happens, other things occur. But perhaps greater funding isn't always the way forward. Now, I just couldn't resist putting this project up because I've always loved it. This is the big top-down overlay. So I would say it's not befriend, mend and tend. You know, that is not always awful. Let's be honest, we live in a world where that hardly ever happens. But consider strategically, thoughtfully doing this kind of scale. Perhaps a little resurfacing, a little dabble with new topography on the Glebe Island site could work wonders. Or not. I just thought, let's have a little look at this project because of the scale is so relevant and that it's a port, it's a working port, that the sort of new public area and public spaces and amenities now happen within the topography inside. What are the opportunities, the design opportunities of working with flat? This is the Yokohama Sea Terminal, and this project was built 25 years ago, but I think it's kind of wonderful. It's surrounded by water, of course, but the sort of slippage of the topography and this working with the flat and just raising kind of these subtle belvederes, like something like that, kind of a viewing platform. And I think I've never visited there. I would like to, but you can see these ideas of the scenographic, these ideas of eyes on the street, creating these spaces where people can sit. I'd love to see this. I wish I'd pulled out some more images where it's activated with people. Didn't, sorry. These images are too lovely. So I guess we hold that, we hold so many wonderful kind of big built projects, and we hold that up against these older / newer ideas getting reconsidered internationally in the conference realm. And here is Marty French's self-initiated, this is his wording off his website, project Girona Shores. It's an ongoing effort. It's a great word. It's an ongoing effort. Two great words. to reclaim, develop and manage a multifunctional green infrastructure. It integrates the city's edge nature as a strategic asset to reimagine a green, open conurbation. See, people just make words up. Its goal is to construct the largest public facility of town. You know, if we're talking about these issues, we're talking about CEPTD issues, we're talking about fundamental assets, we're talking about the events of the site. I've thrown in this terminology of the Belvedere, the distant view. You know, how hard can it be when your distant view is Sydney Harbour? I mean, you couldn't ask for anything, you know, in your lap, I suppose. And it feels like the job here is to reveal just all the existing beauty that's there. And when I look at this Mardi French expression of these very simple interventions, these little episodes, you know, some potentially just workers' pallets put out and picnic gathering spaces provided, the mowing regime, you know, versus the draft Bays West Place strategy that the New South Wales government has prepared. And, you know, when I read over that, you know, Jamie Parker and the Greens will have been critiquing that, and that's why they're had their community meeting about it. But, you know, they outline it as a long-term plan. Like, is it? How long-term is long-term? What if I think of Dr. Yunkaporta's terminology of deep time being 500 years? If I think of Rome and the sort of concepts we're talking about in this studio of the last 2,500, almost 3,000 years, with Capelin Hill originating as a burial ground, and now a political centre and a definition of the capital of the world's political centres. How can we begin to think of 20 years as a long-term plan? Like that's an easy sell, and you know, to a developer's delight. I mean, there's a lovely term. So I am pleased that our Jamie, as I call him, our Jamie there's an air of critique in that whole presentation, and you know, the working with reality. But when I look at that image down the bottom, I don't see the site. I see one building that we can recognise, always good for the stakeholders. That's the power station. Everything else is unrecognisable. Could be anywhere. Could be anywhere. You know, the grading up of that water, very lovely, still, narrow water, is it could almost be on a university campus as a lake. It's a little bit of Darling Harbour. You know, it's sort of highly refined and articulated. And if I think of some of those messy beach reveals that we saw in Marty French's project and we saw in Michael van Valkenburg's revealed Brooklyn Beach, you know, I am charmed by them, honestly, when I see them. And anyway, I'll leave you with that. And this is a little taste of the fringe guest we have. It's only 10 minutes. Bridie King in her waterfront home is on a placard around the corner. That's some more joy for later. So it really is. I guess it's bye for now, really. So that's it. See you on Tuesday. I hope this hasn't overwhelmed you, and keep working hard. Bye for now.